You're watching SNN, the Suncoast News Network, your local news leader.
Welcome back. I'm Marco Lamano. The Biden administration is restoring parts of the National Environmental Policy Act. The 1970 law requires federal agencies to evaluate the environmental impact of construction projects like the building of highways, water infrastructure, and gas pipelines before they get underway. The legislation is considered one of the foundational environmental laws. Key provisions of it were rolled back under the Trump administration. Environmental advocacy groups heavily criticized the move at the time. So what's returned? Federal agencies are required to evaluate environmental impacts of their decisions. Agencies can once again work with communities to decide how to minimize environmental and public health costs. And this establishes new regulations as a floor, not a ceiling, for environmental standards federal agencies should be meeting. And this comes after a UN report that states that the world needs to act now to prevent the worst effects of climate change. But in addition to preventing the worst effects, many climate scientists say it's important as well to adapt and mitigate the worst of climate change, since we're going to be stuck with at least a certain degree of warming this century. Here to talk about plans Florida should take is climate scientist and CEO of the Climate Adaptation Center in Sarasota, Bob Bunting. Climate adaptation, well, who better than the CEO of the Climate Adaptation Center? Right in the name, easy.
Well, I don't know how easy it is, but
it takes a little work. It definitely takes a little work, but that's what we're here to talk about. And we have first, you were giving me reasons why climate adaptation and mitigation is important and why it's also important to do it at a regional level, even though it is a worldwide problem. Let's talk a little about that.
Well, as you mentioned, we're stuck with climate warming now for at least the next 100 years. And that means our only real activity now that we can do and must do is adapt to and learn how to live with climate warming, because we're going to have to do that. So in order to do that, we need to have a regional approach to our issues here in our local area, from hurricanes and sea level rise and increasing heat and all those things that are happening. So that's a very important aspect, and the Climate Adaptation Center is trying to help our community adjust to that in a regional way. So I really believe that we're now at the beginning of the adaptation process, and we're starting to get to that point where we need to raise the roads, we need to make sure we have good evacuation plans to deal with a different climate than we grew up with when we were kids. Our climate now is much different now, and it's rapidly changing.
And one of the things that has changed and is very much associated with Florida would be hurricanes, and with hurricane evacuation centers and evacuations on those roads that you say need to be raised, it's a big deal. So let's talk a little bit about what is important to do in the realm of hurricane safety in a warming world.
Well, so some important things are that we have to realize we have 23 million people in Florida now. This is the last census was 15 million. There are 8 million more people in Florida. So that means getting off the barrier islands and evacuating the state is much, much more difficult now than it's ever been. Combine that with the fact that there are more hurricanes, more severe hurricanes, and more rapidly developing hurricanes, means our warning time with Irma was 6.5 days. Now it's going to be 24 hours, 36 hours at times. So we have to learn how to get off the barrier islands, where to go, the centers that we go to, how do we weather in place. And so this is where we really need to take a whole new look at how we're going to deal with the hurricane issue should we get stuck by one here in Sarasota in the area.
And there are things that we can do in our own homes that could make a big impact. Let's talk about what the government can do, state government, local governments, localities, to incentivize us to really retrofit some of our homes, which some of them are quite old.
That's correct. And in the near term and the long term, we need to lower our carbon footprint. And about 30 to 40% of all the energy we use are in buildings around the world. And the homes, of course, are a main source of energy use. So modernizing those homes with hurricane force windows in this area, a new air conditioning system, solar panels, insulation, and all the modern conveniences that we have that are so energy efficient is something each one of us can do now. And the government needs to help us with tax incentives, better codes, and better ordinances so that it encourages the population to get that done right now. That's something each and every one of us can do right now. And of course, we need to know where we're going. If you haven't decided yet what you're going to do if a Category 2 or 3 hurricane hits here, then this is the time to think about that.
Yes, as we are about a month and a half away, and we've had plenty of May hurricanes in recent years, so now is the time. And as always, Mr. Bunting, we're always happy to have you here.
Thank you, Marco. I hope you invite me back. I like doing this show with you.
Thank you very much.